10 years or so ago, I got to serve on my first board for like our denomination for the Northern California district. And I was elected to this board, as it was still called the Board of Ministry. And it's the board that oversees the people who have sensed a call from God on their lives to serve the church as a pastor or a missionary, to enter into full-time vocational ministry. This board oversees this group of people as they prepare to serve in the church in our denomination. And one of the main responsibilities of this board is to interview every ministry candidate once a year. And so one time a year, this board would get together for a few days. It would take a few days because during those days, we would interview 40 to 50 candidates, one right after the other for multiple days. And it was this really interesting experience for me because I had actually just been ordained, and now I was on this board. And so I had just gone through the process. And as someone who had been preparing for ministry, I didn't like the process at all for a variety of reasons. But now, right, like here I was on the other side of the interviews. And after my very first day, I no longer disliked the process. I hated the process. It was worse than I had even imagined. That day, the first day, I watched a young woman walk into the room for her interview. Now, imagine a room like this, but twice as big, and there's a line of 19 chairs of the board members, and then one chair for her to sit in, in front of all 19 of us. On that day, there are actually two women who serve on this board, but they were late that day. And so this young pastor in training walked into this room full of only men, mostly older men, and she knew two of them. I knew her as a confident young woman, but like this setting was so intimidating. I watched her like shrink in front of us. And then for 45 minutes, she sat and she took questions. Some of them really random because of 19 people, anybody can ask whatever they want. You get some surprises. But this was a group of men she really didn't know. Some of the questions were actually the exact same questions she had already provided written answers for in her materials beforehand. But with, 20-something of us interviewing 40 to 50 candidates, there was no possible way for every board member to read every packet for every candidate. And so it was rough. So that was the first person who I noticed this system does not work for her. But then I actually watched a young Chinese man get interviewed, trying to answer important theological questions with an average translator. It was really painful. And I don't think we learned anything, or at least not what we needed to learn about this candidate. And since most of the board spoke English, we had multiple candidates through the whole process who basically tried to use English, but even if English was their second language, it was clear they weren't comfortable with it, and some of the technical, theological language was so hard. And through the day, after interviews, I just interacted with some of our candidates and realized that overwhelmingly, most of them were terrified of the process. They were really stressed out by it. And for the most part, they felt like they had been interrogated rather than supported as they pursued God's call in their life. And so there was this group of us that were all brand new to the board, and we started talking at the end of the first day, and we're just like, there's got to be a better way, right? There's got to be a more supportive way, a more relational way to do all of this. And so we started brainstorming ideas, and we talked about our own processes that we had just finished, and we sort of expressed, this is what I wish I had in the process. And we started to get really excited about what could be possible. And almost immediately, there was a group of pastors who held most of the leadership positions on the board, and they started to push back on us. They'd been on the board a long time. They had been doing these interviews a long time. And the thing that they kept saying to us over and over was, this process is what we had to do. We all had to go through this. They should too. We weren't talking about getting rid of the process altogether. We were just talking about changing it to take better care of our candidates along the way. Because some people are in the process for 4 to 10 years. I start with a story about a group of pastors, because our passage this morning calls us to a high standard of love. And it's a standard that seems like ridiculously simple. So simple that everyone thinks they know it and follow it, and everyone knows it and says they believe in it. I mean, society, right, refers to this commonly as the golden rule because it is so apparently obvious that it's a good rule for everyone to follow, and everyone should just follow it. And yet, this group of pastors, of godly pastors, these are some people that I respect so deeply and have known for years. These are people who love Jesus and who want the best for future pastors. But pastors can miss it because it's been a while, maybe, since they thought about what they might have wanted others to do to them. Instead, as they've taken on leadership of this process, they've spent years remembering not what they wanted others to do to them, but what others did to them. And their ministry, their actions are a direct result of what was done to them. So whatever you wish that others would do to you, do also to them. Whatever you wish others would do. I'm torn. It feels unfortunate a little bit that the ESV translation uses the word wish here to translate the Greek. But I mean, I sort of get it because it expresses, right? Wishes express like hope and longing. But the word means will or desire, right? Like, what do you want? What do you desire? But there is this hopeful part of it. It's hopeful because, right, we can't control people in our lives, but we really want them to act toward us in certain ways. And so I get why they translated it as wish. But what do you want other people to do to you? This is what we should do to others. This is how Jesus summarizes God's law and all that God spoke through the prophets. And it really does seem so simple, but we miss it. Like again and again. When I was in seminary, I had this professor who deliberately chose to lecture for 4 straight hours, 5 days a week. Him in front of us speaking, us listening and taking notes meticulously every day. He might some days give us a bathroom break if he needed one, but he might not. And when we asked him, or whenever he was asked why he doesn't use any of the modern teaching strategies that show that people learn more if you use some of them, his answer was always the same. This is how I had to learn. I learned it, so this is how you will learn. right? This is what others did to me, and so I will do the same to you. I've heard high school teachers say these kinds of things, right? We had to do this when I was a kid, and if you're a teacher one day, you can make kids do it too. The amazing thing is it doesn't take very long for us to adopt this like not quite so golden version of the rule. I have cross-country runners who are still in the program. One of them is a sophomore, right? So he's only been in the program 1 year, and all season they've been complaining that our new freshmen don't have to do the things that they had to do when they were freshmen. And when I remind them that they complain all the time about their freshman year, and I remind them that they keep saying they really want these new runners to stick with the program, it's like none of that matters, right? Yeah, but they should have to do the things that we had to do. When they think about it, even for just like a minute, when I ask them what they wish their freshman year would have looked like they all have immediate answers. They know exactly what they wish it would have looked like, but they don't want that for the current freshman because they want the current freshman to suffer the way that they suffered. And this is like bonus suffering to the normal suffering of running. Let me just make that clear. There is like a base level of suffering in what we do, but they're like bonus. Sometimes it feels like we are just living so quickly, such a hurried pace of life, so fast, so distracted that we don't really slow down and give ourselves the chance to reflect on our attitudes, our mindsets, our approach to the world. And the great challenge with the passage that's in front of us this morning is that it takes multiple deliberative steps that we often don't have time for any of the steps, let alone all of them. Right? Because before you can figure out what to do, like what should I do to others, for others, like you have to have some sense of what you want others to do to you. And the moment we sit with this step for any amount of time, we just start to notice that things are a little messy because, right, on one hand, I kind of want people to leave me alone. I don't want anyone to tell me that I'm doing something wrong. Like, I don't want anybody in my business questioning my decisions. I don't want others to require anything of me or expect anything of me. And at the same time, I want those things. I want all of those things, right? I want to grow as a person, which means I need correction, right? I want to improve, which means I need people to help me fix what I'm doing that's wrong. I want others to have high expectations of me because I want to rise to those. I don't want to settle for low expectations. And so we realize like what we want and what we desire, it's messy. Because like, what do I want in any given moment? What happens when I want two conflicting things? Because I want to be comfortable and I want to grow. It is literally impossible for both of those things to happen at the same time. Right? Like every day, I have a runner who asks me, is today going to be an easy run? And every day, I ask her, do you want to get faster? If she wants to run easy, she can go run on her own. If she wants to grow as a runner, she should keep running with us. Like, it'll never be easy. My favorite day was when I told her, I have a great quote for you to remember. It never gets easier. You just get faster. And she goes, that's not encouraging. I was like, fantastic, but it's true. Like growth, it just requires struggle and work. And one of the core struggles for us as we follow Jesus, as we hear Jesus call us to this kind of life, is that we're invited to act first, to do for others before they've done to us. to take the initiative. I know a guy who didn't grow up in the church, didn't really have strong male role models or mentors when he was young, and for years wanted an older, mature man to show up in his life and to kind of be a father figure. At a certain point, the same guy started having his own kids, and he found himself really wanting for his kids what he never had and always wished he had. He wanted to be a dad for them in ways that he hadn't experienced a dad present. And he also wanted other adults to show up for them. He wanted other adults to care for his kids and to be part of a community of support. And for years he would lament that it felt like other adults just weren't showing up for his kids the way that he wished that they would. During those years as well, there were a few different times where he would get asked to serve kids in church or youth and other ministries, and often would say no for various reasons, all reasonable. But there was this real sense that this guy wanted something from others, but often, not always, wasn't doing the thing he wanted others to do for him. But it's kind of cool. In the last year, I've seen him take a new and significant step toward doing for others what he wants others to do for him. And he's started making some really meaningful connections with other people's kids. And he's just putting Jesus' words into practice by taking action first and not waiting for somebody else to do what Jesus is calling him to do. If you've ever listened to marriage advice, good marriage advice, there's bad advice out there, or any good relationship advice for that matter, at the heart of it usually is you can never make another person change by telling them they need to change, by telling them what to do. What you can do is offer them the very thing that you want them to do in return. You can be the person that God is calling us all to be. And you can start that, and you can stop waiting for the other person to start that. And you can stop making the excuse that, I'm not going to do it yet until they do. Because Jesus just speaks to you and says, now's the time. You start. I'll deal with them. I love them as well. And there's this crazy thing, right? Where we hear Jesus saying, okay, you just do the thing. You just be the person. You just follow me. And we can quickly sort of assume, okay, if I do it, then they'll change. But there is no guarantee that it will work. There's just you, me, doing the hard thing that Jesus is asking us to do. It's just you, right? Facing the real struggle to be like Jesus. And isn't that actually the heart of this passage? The golden rule isn't actually something first for us to do. The golden rule, I've been watching too much Instagram. The golden rule is basically just a description of who God is and what God does. Right? Which makes this all very interesting because when we hear Jesus say, this is the law and the prophets, we tend to think that he's talking about all of the rules and the commands that we find in the law, that we find in the prophets. But what if Jesus is actually just telling us this is the entire story of the Hebrew Bible? Starting from Genesis, finishing with Malachi, what if the entire Bible is just the story of God doing for us what he wants us to do for him? And God starting and taking the initiative. That if God wants us to take care of the creation, to look after it and to make it flourish like we hear in Genesis 1 and 2, Isn't that exactly what he does for us first? That Jesus comes to us, giving us abundant, overflowing life. Jesus generously feeds his followers so that they are full and satisfied, we read in the Gospels. And then he wants us to be generous like him, who shares out of the Father's abundance. Jesus gently corrects those who are tearing apart the world and human communities. And then he wants us to do the same as we correct one another. And he graciously heals people who have been hurt, and he sends us out to heal, having been healed ourselves. God wants us to give ourselves completely to him. But God never stands at a distance demanding that we do it. God takes on human flesh and he comes close to us, and then he gives his life over to us completely. He does for us long before any of us even think about doing for him. And in this way, the law and the prophets, the Hebrew scriptures, are one long meditation on all that God has also done to them being us. The Apostle Paul will tell us in one of his letters that it is God's kindness. I think one way of saying it's God's initiative. It's God's actions towards us while we were still sinners, while we were set against him as enemies. That's what God did for us in his gentle, loving kindness that leads us to a change of direction. And so we don't read this and go, okay, I got to figure out how to do for people what I want them to do for me. The starting place, as in all of the Sermon on the Mount, has been a meditation on what our Father is like, who our Father is and what he has done. What do you want God to do for you? What has God already done for you? That is the question we ask and answer every week as we come to the table. Because we start with what God has done for us in and through Christ. And then there is space and there's time for us to start listing all of the other things as well. And so this morning, I want you, as we prepare to come to the table, to start thinking of what are the things that God has done for you before you ever did anything for him.